صلوا على محمد وآل محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Before we begin the lecture, a small ruling. If one is feeling sick in a day in Shahr Ramadan and they cannot go on in fasting, it's okay for them to break their fast. This isn't just a sickness like flu, for example, or a cold. If someone has a sickness that it will get worse after Shahr Ramadan, he may not feel it on the same day. For example, someone has diabetes, they have to take medicine at a specific time. If they don't, something messes up in their body, but they don't realize it for a few weeks later, for example. If there's the potential that they may damage their health, even after Shahr Ramadan, then it might even be haram for that person to fast. They would not have to fast. If someone recovers before the next Shahr Ramadan that comes, then they should redo that day. If they can't redo that day, so someone who is permanently in this condition, he has to pay a fidya for every day, a fidya, which is the equivalent of 750 grams of wheat. So however much 750 grams of wheat costs here, that's how much someone would have to pay. Of course, if you want to pay more, you can, to feed someone. He has to feed a human being, a poor person. You would pay the equivalent of the 750 grams if you are permanently in that state. So if anyone here, inshallah, everyone here is pretty youthful, so hopefully no one's gone through something like that. But for their parents, for anyone you see who might be struggling, it would be good to pass on that information. Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
We spoke yesterday about Rasulullah's birth, sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi, and the tribe that he came to. And we mentioned that when he was born, Fatima bint Asad went to Abu Talib. She went to congratulate him on the birth of his nephew, on the birth of this special boy that Abdul Muttalib was so joyed with. As she's congratulating him, Abu Talib says to her, "Usburi alayya sabtan atiki bimithlihi." If you wait, if you're patient with me for 30 years, I'll bring you someone like him. 30 years later, Fatima is pregnant. 9 months pregnant, and she is walking towards the Kaaba. She's about to give birth. As she reaches the Kaaba, she raises her hands to the sky, and she begins to pray. She says, "Ya Allah, I believe in you, and I believe in your prophets, and by the one who built this house, and by the one in my womb, make the pangs of pregnancy easy on me." As Fatima prayed, the walls of the Kaaba came down. Even to now, the mark is there. They tried to hide it as much as they can, but it's still there. She went inside the Kaaba and the walls came back up. The reports of this event say that there was panic around the Kaaba. How could a woman just go inside the Kaaba like that? They went and they tried to open it up. It wouldn't open. Even the keys wouldn't work. They would try to go inside. No one could. For 3 days, no one could enter the Kaaba. For 3 days, she stayed inside, living off the sustenance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, feeding her newborn baby. After 3 days, she came outside with Ali ibn Abi Talib. Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
She brought the baby out. For 3 days, baby Ali would not open his eyes. They kept them shut for 3 days. Until Rasulullah held him. That's when Imam Ali alayhi salam opened his eyes. The first thing he saw in life was the face of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Rasulullah says, "Khassani bin-nazar wa khassastuhu bil-ilm." He chose me for sight, I chose him for knowledge. He specified me for sight, I specified him for knowledge. So Rasulullah began to raise this boy. Rasulullah was 30 years old at the time, let's remember that. So he was still living in the house of Abu Talib. He wasn't married yet. They tell us that he was married at 25. And that Sayyidah Khadijah was 40. He wasn't married at 30 years old. He was still living in Abu Talib's house. He used to put the cradle of Ali and he would sleep next to it. Always smelling him, touching him, holding him. He would chew the food and put it in the child's mouth. He would always be with him. As Imam Ali grew up, when he was able to walk and run, his whole life was Rasulullah. Everything was Muhammad. Wherever he went, he wants to go, always by his side. When people would throw stones at Rasulullah, Imam Ali would want to go out with him. Rasulullah wouldn't do anything, of course. The Prophet isn't going to pick a fight with the children. He wouldn't do it to anyone. The children would take advantage of this. They'd throw stones at him. And Rasulullah would keep walking. Sallallahu Muhammad wa Muhammad. Rasulullah would keep walking, and they would throw the stones at him. So Imam Ali alayhi salam would run outside, and he would go to them and he'd twist their ears. So that when they grew up later on and he'd meet them in battle, they'd be like, you're the one who twisted the ears. They remember him from when they were children. When he says, Ana Ali, that they remember, he's the one who used to twist our ears when they were kids. He used to defend Rasulullah. He says, they say about him, Ittiba' al-fasil atura ummeh. The fasil is like the baby of the mountain, like the baby of the camel. How the camel walks, the baby camel walks in between the legs. Imam Ali says, that's how I was. That's what's said by Imam Ali with Rasulullah. Like the camel and the baby camel. It's always walking in between his legs. He was always with him. And Ali said this afterwards, you know I was raised by him. يُضُمُّنِي إِلَى صَدْرِهِ. He used to hold me to his chest. He used to feed me food from his mouth. He used to teach me ethics. He used to teach me knowledge. He used to increase me in everything. Imam Ali was raised by him. Imam Sadiq alayhi salam says that كان علي يرى مع رسول الله الضوء ويسمع الصوت. Imam Ali alayhi salam used to see the light with Rasulullah and used to hear the sound, the light and the sound. Imam Sadiq is talking about something really profound. He used to see the light with Rasulullah and used to hear the salt, the sound. And as the Imam grew up with him, he was always by his side. He became everything. His advisor, his personal bodyguard, his secretary, his general, the flag bearer. He was everything to the Prophet. Sometimes people say, why didn't Rasulullah make it clear who was in charge after him? He did. If you just look at his life, he did. It was very evident. If you just gather all the different stories that are around, you realize there was no one even comparatively close to him, like Imam Ali alayhi salam. When Rasulullah would be in the mosque, Rasulullah would be sitting down. No one would dare come to Rasulullah and pick him up. Although it doesn't mean much, but if it's Rasulullah, like right now, imagine yourself, imagine Imam Abdul Latif right now sitting in the corner, you go to him and you pick him up when he's tired. No one really goes to do that for a man with aura. Imagine Rasulullah. So in the mosque they wouldn't, only Ali would. He would go and he would lift him by the hand and pick him up when his knees would hurt. He would pick up the Prophet. Small little details like that. If you notice it throughout their history, they would sit down together. Imam Ali says, I would ask him questions and he would answer me. And I would ask and he would answer, and then I'd stop asking and I'd remain silent. When I stopped asking, Rasulullah would come to whisper in my ear. He would begin to tell me things without me asking. And the companions sitting around became so eager and curious. What's he saying? What's he saying? Especially the Khalifas after him. They want to know what was said. And when Rasulullah finished, they come to Imam Ali. What did he tell you? And he would say, he opened for me 1,000 doors of knowledge. And from each door, he opened 1,000 doors of knowledge. Sallallahu alaihi There's one story that I enjoy. There was a woman who was the daughter of one of the leaders, one of the tribe. Now the Muslims had taken her in the war, but Rasulullah did not want to make her a prisoner because her father was very influential. So he waited until her father would come to Medina to speak to him, so he can bring him towards Islam. So he kept the woman there. Now the woman wanted to go, and she sees how soft Rasulullah is. She's shy. She wants to ask him to let her go. Now Rasulullah knows this. And Imam Ali, as we said, is always with him. Very hardly is he away from him. She would look at Ali, and Ali would tell her, speak to him now. Speak to him now. Yeah, what does that tell you? He was the secretary of the Prophet. If someone wants to come to the Prophet, they go to Ali. He would bring you towards the Prophet. He was so close to him. Even in wars, when they were in wars, Imam Ali alayhi salam would not go more than a few meters away and then come back to check on Rasulullah to see if he's okay. He couldn't. He was too attached to him. Forget war. I'm coming to that. One time they came back to Medina. They walked towards Rasulullah's house. Rasulullah went inside, and Imam Ali alayhi salam began to walk, but he just became worried. Worry overtook his heart. He missed the Prophet. He had been with him just a minute later, a minute before. But he was worried. He went back to the house and he knocked on the door. And the woman answered. And she said, Muhammad is busy now. So Imam Ali stopped. He walked a few steps away, but he couldn't. You know when they say, he had to. He came back, he knocked again. She'd say, he's busy. He wouldn't go. He has to see him. Rasulullah comes by, he says, who's at the door? She says, Ali. He says, open the door. Open the door. They were so close. They couldn't be separated. In the world of truth, they were one light. When Adam was born, they became two lights. But they are from one light. In essence, they are one. They came down for the same mission. Even Muawiyah, the arch enemy of Islam, and the arch enemy of Ali ibn Abi Talib, the one who started making the la'an of Imam Ali on the minbar on Fridays a custom for 90 years. They would do la'an of Imam Ali. Muawiyah is the one who started that. What does Muawiyah say about Imam Ali alayhi salam? In a book called Siffin, a very ancient book, there's a letter. A letter is written to Muawiyah. Muawiyah replies to this letter. What does he write in it? He says, you're right. كان علي في زمن رسول الله كالنجم في السماء لا يطاول. Imam Ali alayhi salam was like the stars in the sky at the time of Rasulullah. You could not reach him. Muawiyah is saying it. Even Muawiyah acknowledges Imam Ali's place with Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Now when Imam Ali alayhi salam was about 5 to 7 years old, so Rasulullah was 35 years old. In this time, the Prophet met a very special lady. This woman was known as Sayyidat Quraysh, the princess of Quraysh. All the men wanted her. The chiefs of Quraysh always tried to speak to her for marriage. Abu Jahl, Abu Sufyan, she wouldn't accept anyone. She was a millionairess. She had all the wealth, and the woman envied her. She wouldn't go with anyone. Now, she used to have caravans that would go towards Damascus and Yemen, as we spoke about the last few nights. She wanted someone skilled, who could lead the caravan and go to Damascus and break deals and come back, who knew the roads, who could avoid the bandits, who knew how to speak to the tribes. So she told the head of her administration, Maysara. She told Maysara to find someone for her. Maysara told her, I know someone. I have heard of this man named Muhammad, and he memorizes everything. So she told him, okay, go arrange for Muhammad to go onto this and to lead this caravan. So Maysara goes to Abu Talib, and he speaks to Abu Talib about having Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi come with him to Damascus. And Abu Talib agrees. He tells Rasulullah. And so now Muhammad becomes partners with Khadijah. He goes on to Damascus. He goes on and he engages in the trade, and they make profit like never before. They make so much money and the best deals. So when they come back, Maysara is in awe. Rasulullah, very humble, goes back to his house. Maysara can't believe what happened on this trip. He goes to Khadijah and begins to tell her about this man. He's incredible. They believe him, whatever he says. They all trust him. He makes deals like no other. And Khadijah listening to this, who's this man? You know, in the Arab tradition, they say that ishq comes to the ear before the eyes. You know, her heart is starting to grow for this man. Who is this Sadiq al-Amin? He's telling her, whenever he'd make a deal, after the deal is finished, he went and sat in the corner and would sit by himself. And it's as if he's speaking to someone. He begins to speak to himself or a higher being. She's listening, who is this? Her heart is going towards him now. Soon, Khadijah realizes this is the man she's been waiting for. No one else in Quraysh could catch Khadijah's eye. All the men wanted her. The chiefs of Quraysh wanted her. She had all the money in the world. But she had love for this orphan boy. So, what does Khadijah do? What would any girl do? Khadijah's not any girl. Khadijah alayhi salam, she speaks to her friend Nafisa to go and speak to Rasulullah. What he thinks about Khadijah. It's pretty cute, isn't it? So Nafisa goes to Rasulullah and she says, Muhammad, why aren't you married yet? What are you waiting for? You're 35 years old. What's the hold up? So Rasulullah tells her, I don't have that with which to get married with. He's very humble. So she tells him, what if I told you there was a woman that would take care of everything you need? He said, who? She said, Khadijah. Khadijah? He said, Khadijah wants to... How? Me? Look how high she was. He said, all the chiefs of Quraysh, she rejected them. She wants to speak to you. Okay? So Khadijah came to speak to Rasulullah, and she told him about her feelings. She told him how she felt. She told him she liked his akhlaq, the way he was, so truthful, a sadiq al-amin. She loves his honor. Rasulullah is very soft-hearted. This gesture really, really melted him. So Rasulullah, although he was 35 years old, and although he was an orphan, because he was raised by Abu Talib, look at the respect, he stops and he goes to Abu Talib to speak to him about this. He goes and tells Abu Talib. Abu Talib was very overjoyed by it. And Khadijah, the princess, Sayyidat Quraysh. So Abu Talib takes the family, he goes to Rasulullah, and they go to the house of Khadijah, where her uncle is the one who raised her. It said in the narrations that her father had died, so her uncle raised her. So she didn't have a wedding. So she could have gotten married. So they come into the house, they sit down, and Abu Talib is the one who performs the nikah. And he gives a speech about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, about his messengers, about the message. They try to tell us that Abu Talib is a kafir. That Abu Talib was a pagan. He died a pagan, unbeliever. At the nikah, he gave a speech in the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he said about Rasulullah, وَاللَّهُ وَهُوَ بَعْدَ هَذَا لَهُ نَبَأَ عَظِيمٌ وَدِينٌ شَائِعٌ. After this, he's going to come with a great news and a widespread religion. Abu Talib said that about Imam Ali alayhi salam, about Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So they perform the nikah, and now the time comes for the mahr, the dowry. What's the dowry? And of course, Rasulullah doesn't have anything. So Khadijah wants to pay the dowry herself, and then people begin to laugh. Is the dowry from the woman to the man now? They begin to make fun. And Abu Talib becomes upset by this. He says, if any one of you were like my nephew, then you would have the most expensive of dowries. But you don't let anyone get married because you charge so much for dowry. So they said, who will pay it then? And then little Ali comes, 5 years old. He says, Abi! My father will pay it. And Abu Talib looks at him and says, Abi anta wa ummi. And so the narration says that Abu Talib gave the man to Rasulullah with which he paid the dowry to marry Khadijah, and they lived the best of lives together. They truly were a reality of what a couple should be. True hope. So many of us lose hope now in what a relationship could be between a man and a woman, as if we're destined to fight or destined to break up. No way. Wallah, if you just look at the marriage of Khadijah to Rasulullah, there was no I. There was no ego. She gave everything for him. And she was with him when he had nothing. He was not yet the king of the Arabs. He had nothing. And she gave him everything from her wealth, from herself. And he truly, truly loved her like no other. Later on in life, whenever you think of it, you feel sorrow in his heart. His long-lost love. You know, Ali alayhi salam also experienced this with Sayyidah Fatima. And he writes a poem for her. كل اجتماع من خليلين فرقة وكل الذي دون الفراق قليل. For every gathering between two loved ones, there is separation. And everything apart from separation is trivial. That the separation of a loved one is the hardest thing. But no doubt, the fact that there's a gathering means there will be a separation. But in that time of gathering, to live love the way Khadijah lived with Rasulullah, that's true love. It's truly love. Khadijah had something we call jah, like pride. She was very strong, a strong personality. She stepped on that jah. She didn't care about it. She sacrificed it for Rasulullah. She's the one who came to Rasulullah. She came and asked him for his hand. Her wealth gave it all to him. The woman also needs physical affection. She even sacrificed that. Rasulullah would spend so much time in Ghar Hira, in meditation, sometimes a month at a time. She would go herself to the cave, bring him food and water, and put it down for him to eat and drink after his contemplation and meditation. She would sacrifice even that, give him as much alone time as he needs. She would not get jealous. Although she saw how much she loved Imam Ali alayhi salam, she wouldn't get jealous. There was one time they were sitting in the house and she saw Rasulullah sitting down and he looked sad, he looked sorrowful. And she asked him, "What's wrong?" And he said, "I miss Ali." So she got up immediately and she ripped on her animal and she went to find Imam Ali alayhi salam in Mecca, looking for him. Rasulullah misses him, she has to find him. So she finds the Imam, she tells him, "Muhammad wants to see you." Of course, immediately, Imam Ali feels something in his heart. Their hearts are just, they're one. And they go towards the house. And when Rasulullah sees him, as if they haven't seen each other in 10 years, they probably saw each other like the afternoon. They see each other and they run and they hug each other. And the embrace is so long. Khadijah says, because Khadijah would never sit down before Rasulullah. She would stay standing up. So she says her legs began to hurt because they wouldn't stop hugging. Sallallahu alaihi wasallam. See, Khadijah was like Ibrahim. So Ibrahim, he took Ismail to sacrifice him. He didn't end up slaughtering Ismail, but he slaughtered all love aside from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Khadijah too, slaughtered her wealth, slaughtered the jah, slaughtered everything to do with I. She truly loved. There was no more me. She really lived love in reality. And why did she do that? Because she loved Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala so much. All she saw in Muhammad was Allah, her creator. In service to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, she served His Prophet. She completely forgot about herself. And that's love. That's love. You know, when they talk about Majnoon or Layla, that's love. Majnoon. You know, Majnoon would knock on the door, and Layla would say, "Who is it?" And Majnoon would say, "Ana, me." Then he would knock again, and Layla would say, "Who is it?" And he'd say, "Anti, you." There's no more Majnoon. There's only Layla. That's love. They use Majnoon and Layla as an example for how we should be with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. A lot of the time, mystics use these poems. One time Majnoon was sitting down with a dog. And he was feeding the dog and he was petting it with so much affection. So people came back, what's wrong with you? Why are you treating that dog in that way? He says, don't blame me. Don't blame me. He says, I once saw this dog in the vicinity of Layla. So my affection and love grew towards this dog. A dog, but because he was next to Layla, because he just passed through Layla, Majnun treated him with affection and love. And we say we love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala so much, right? We say we love Him more than everything, right? But our actions say differently. They really do. There was once a sister, she was telling me, brother, I want spirituality. I love Allah so much. I just want to be taken over by Him. And she was giving me a lot of poems by Rumi. And she was dressed very promiscuously. I was trying not to judge. I'm listening to what she's saying. But I said, sister, you know, spirituality, it comes. But if you look towards our mystics, and the most spiritual of people, like Shaykh Bahjat, he says that come to the Risala, Amaliyah, the fiqh, don't do haram, start from there. That's real spirituality. There's no point to go into ishq and Allah and love and Layla Majnun if you're not doing what the beloved wants you to do. What's the point? If you love, you do what the beloved wants. You love what the beloved loves. If the beloved tells you do, you do. If the beloved tells you no, you don't. So right now, Fajr time, 4 a.m. The beloved says, I want to speak to you. We don't wake up. Right? But if the 15-year-old crush you have at school, Stacy, says, I want to see you at 4 a.m., you're up at 3:30, jelling your head. Right? Puts it into perspective, no? You'd see your girlfriend at 5 a.m., but you won't wake up to pray. So who do you love more? Who? We can say we love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala till tomorrow. But Allah wants to see the proof of that love. You know? No more. Knock knock, who's there? Enter. Just Him. Sallallahu Muhammad wa Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Sayyidah Khadijah, unfortunately, there are embarrassing topics to even mention. But we will, because we have to. Because there's such a big misconception about her. It was a political rewriting of her life to make her seem less than other wives of the Prophet. To make it seem like the Prophet loved another woman. To make it seem like he only married one virgin. Not that Khadijah was not the virgin. That Khadijah was married before Rasulullah to a man from Bani Tamim. That Khadijah was 15 to 20 years older than Rasulullah. That Khadijah had children from outside the marriage of Rasulullah, and even inside the marriage, just to lower the status of Sayyidah Fatima alayhi salam. Remember we spoke about these things yesterday. Okay, let's start with the marriage. I'm going to ask you guys now, because I think in the last couple of nights, just knowing Quraysh, knowing Rasulullah, knowing about the character assassination, you yourself can answer. Would Sayyidah Khadijah marry someone outside of Quraysh? Would the princess of Quraysh marry someone outside of Quraysh? Would a normal woman from Quraysh marry someone outside of Quraysh? If Abu Sufyan and Abu Jahl and all these people want to marry this woman, and she says no, then a random Bedouin Arab comes to marry her, the tribe will never accept. Abu Sufyan will probably kill him. We'll never have it. Coming to Quraysh, our princess, we would never accept. And when she married Rasulullah, all the women would hate on her. How could you marry the orphan? And all these men want you. Would she? A good story to know is the cousin of Rasulullah. Her name is Zainab bin Jahsh. It's a tough name, huh? Zainab, let's say Zainab. Zainab, she's the cousin of Rasulullah. She tells Rasulullah, she wants to get married. She's hinting. She wants him to marry her. She's hinting it. What does Rasulullah say? He brings his adopted son Zayd. Zayd al-Hub. Zayd ibn Muhammad. Zayd was kidnapped as a child. Then he was taken as a slave. He ended up in the hands of Rasulullah, and Rasulullah took him in as his own, and he raised him. Later on, his father, Haritha, Zayd ibn Haritha, Haritha came to Mecca and found Zayd and wants to bring him back, but Zayd can't go back anymore. He says, I can't. After living with Muhammad, something tells me I can't leave him. I have to stay here. This tells a lot about how Rasulullah treated him. You can't leave him. Haritha gets so upset by this, he denounces that he's his father. I am not your father anymore. So Muhammad says he's my son. So then he becomes known as Zayd ibn Muhammad. Zayd al-Hub, from how much Rasulullah loved him. Rasulullah brings Zayd al-Hub to Zainab, and Zainab is so offended. You bring me Zayd, and I am a Sayyidah of Quraysh? How can you bring me Zayd? She's offended by it. And that's Zainab bin Jahsh, not Khadijah, alayhi salam. If Zainab thinks like this, what would the status be of Khadijah? No one would accept it. No one. So for Sayyidah Khadijah to marry someone before Rasulullah is impossible. And this will be even clearer when we get to her age. Sallallahu alayhi Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.
Now there are several reports about how many children she had. There's a report that she had a son named Harith. And that Harith was the first Shaheed of Islam. And we know the first Shaheeda of Islam was Sumayyah, the mother of Yasir, of Ammar, the wife of Yasir. Yasir and Sumayyah were the first Shuhada in Islam. And this is for all schools within Islam. So we know straight away that this guy Harith doesn't exist. So there was no son of Khadijah named Harith. She gave Rasulullah 3 children. Sayyidah Fatima alayhi salam, Abdullah and Qasim. Abdullah and Qasim died in infancy. Sayyidah Fatima is the only one that lived. They tried to tell us that she had other daughters, named Zainab, named Ruqayya, named Kulthum, and that Uthman married Ruqayya and Kulthum, and that's why they call him Dhul Nurayn, the one of 2 lights. So Imam Ali is the one of 1 light, and he's of 2 lights. They were not, sallallahu alayhi wa They were not, in fact, the daughters of Rasulullah, nor were they the daughters of Sayyidah Khadijah. Sayyidah Khadijah had a sister named Hala. Hala either died, the narration says she died when Rasulullah and Sayyidah Khadijah got married, or she was widowed. Sayyidah Khadijah took the girls into her own home. Her wealth could support them, her house could support them. She took them in and Rasulullah accepted. That's it. And because they are in Rasulullah's house, when people would say to Rasulullah, Banatuka, Banatuka, what are they going to say? The girls of your house, Banatuka. The woman in your house, the daughters in your house, very young children. Banatuka. So, they are not the daughters of Khadijah, nor are they the daughters of Rasulullah. They are the daughters of Hala, and Khadijah took them into her house. Now when it gets to her age, they tell us she was 40, he was 25, right? If you calculate that, it's completely wrong. You just calculate mathematically before you get into narrations. The narration, Ibn Ashab says that she was 28. Bayhaqi says that she was 25. There are narrations that say she was 25 and 28. She couldn't have been older than 28. Impossible. In that time, the woman would mature much faster than the woman right now. A girl of 10 years old at that time was ready for marriage. Right now, a girl of 18, 19 begins ready to get married. The body of the girl at that time would mature much faster. So, the menopause would come earlier also. Keep that in mind. If we have to say Rasulullah was 25, we have to say she was 40 years old. Okay. Rasulullah received the message of prophethood when he was how old? 40. So that's in 15 years. 25 plus 15 is 40. Sayyidah Fatima was born when Rasulullah was 45 years old. So you add another 5. That's 20 years. So from 25, you add 20 years, he's 45. If she's 40 years old, how old is she when Sayyidah Fatima was born? 60 years old. Does that make sense? Would the princess of Quraysh wait till she's 60 years old until she has a baby? Then you add on the narrations, and you add on the other stories, Imam Ali's birth, Rasulullah being 30 years old, him being 5 years old at the nikah. Sayyidah Khadijah was no older than 28 years old. She couldn't have been. Sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Then we come to the last issue of the night, that of Abu Talib, the father of Imam Ali alayhi salam. We are told that he was a pagan. All of this just because he is the father of Ali. They want to hurt Imam Ali in any way they can, so they attacked his father. And his father sacrificed everything for Rasulullah. He had this nakhwa. They call it nakhwa. He was the first to act. Abu Talib. Always courageous. He always protected Rasul on his mission. You know when Rasulullah says, me and the one who brings up an orphan are together in heaven? He's talking about Abu Talib, the one who brings up the orphan. Kafir al-Yatim is Abu Talib. Abu Talib on Yawm al-Dar, when the ayah came down, وَانْذِرْ عَشِيرَتَكَ الْأَقْرَبِينَ, and Rasulullah had to gather Bani Hashim and speak to them about the great news that he's got from Allah. He's going to tell them who's the wasi after him. He gathers them all. And Abu Lahab is sitting down, Abu Talib is sitting down, and as Rasulullah begins to speak, Abu Lahab begins to make fun of Rasulullah. He's the uncle of Rasulullah. He's the brother of Abu Talib. But he begins to make fun of the Rasul. What are you talking about? You know what Abu Talib says to him? Is Uskut. He says, Qum ya Sayyidi. Get up, my master. To Rasulullah he says that. He's a chief of Quraysh. Rasulullah is still young at this time. Around 40 years old. 40 something years old.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaykum assalam wa rahmatullah. Sallallahu alaihi wa
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali.
So he says to him, Qum ya Sayyidi. Speak what you want to speak. Tell us of the message. For you are the truthful one. Abu Talib's stories throughout the life of Rasulullah speak for themselves. But someone will come and say, well, he's from Quraysh, Rasulullah is from Quraysh, so it's a tribal thing. If it's a tribal thing or a family thing, then why didn't Abu Lahab do the same thing for him? Why was Abu Lahab such a thorn in Rasulullah's eye? Say, okay, fine, well, it's because he's his nephew. Because he's his nephew, not because he's a Muslim. He's his nephew, so he'll do everything for him. Okay, so he loves his nephew more than his son? And he put Imam Ali in the way of danger so many times before Muhammad. He sacrificed Imam Ali so many times before Rasulullah. So if he's going to love someone, it will be his son, not his nephew. No, Abu Talib was a mu'min, a Muslim, someone who was going to give his life and everything he had for this deen. Now, he did trick Quraysh. Imam Zayn al-Abidin says, Astaghfir Rasulullah wa Abu Talib Quraysh. They tricked him. Why did Abu Talib trick Quraysh? And this was a strategy from Rasulullah. The Prophet, he didn't want there to be a massacre inside Mecca. He didn't want there to be street fights. And he only had a few dozen Muslims. They would have been annihilated straight away. So to avoid this, he brought it from the streets to the negotiating table. He made Abu Talib be the one who would stand in between the Muslims and the pagans. So when the pagans had a problem, they'd think Abu Talib is one of their own. They would come to speak to Abu Talib. Abu Talib would tell them, yes, I'll speak to him. Then he comes to Rasulullah. Rasulullah will tell him, if they give me the sun in my right, the moon in my left, I will not leave the deen. And Abu Talib will not even ask him to. And something that they miss, a great fact, is that Fatima bint Asad, who was a known Muslim, who did not hide her iman, stayed with Abu Talib. She stayed living in the house of Abu Talib, and it was known at the time that a Muslim woman, when she becomes Muslim, she leaves the pagan. She's no longer with him. She has to leave the pagan. So if he was a pagan, she would have left him. She lived with him and stayed with something that they didn't notice. So he hid his iman. They say he hid his iman like Al-Fir'aun.